Who would pass the bloody gate?
The bloody hound.
Hello one and all, Jasper here, and for today's edition of Iron Throwdown, we will be looking at two of the heaviest hitters in all of A Song of Ice and Fire. The loyal hound Sandor Clegange will be facing off against the Iron Kraken Victarion Greyjoy, both powerful and heavily armored opponents who are likely to give us one hell of a show. But before we start discussing our two combatants, I think we should go over some general rules for what the fighters will be going through. The first rule is this will be single combat, one-on-one with no outside help from dragons or wolves or other sort of companions. Second, the battle will take place in the fighting pits of Meereen. Why? It's an arena. Third, the combatants may only bring in 2 weapons, and if you are wondering, yes, shields do count. Also, if a fighter happens to fancy a bow or crossbow, then the bow and arrows count as one. You're not going to be stuck with only a single arrow and a single bow. Fourth, the weapons and armor must be at their disposal, and there must be some mention of it in the books. If a character is not ever described as having a weapon like, say, Tormund, then either the show version will be used or some educated assumptions will be made. Fifth, the book takes priority. Events in the show will not be counted if it does not work in the continuity of the book. For example, Sandor Clegange had already been left to die by Arya in the books long before he would have engaged Brienne in combat, so that fight is null and void. Sixth and finally, no poison. And do I even need to say it?
Poison's a woman's weapon.
Let's start by talking about the fan favorite of this bout, Sandor Clegange. Clegane is a man who towers over most people, and he's built like an ox to match. He's also proof that you don't need to be a knight to earn a very dangerous reputation. Sandor had always been accustomed to pain and death. In fact, one of his first experiences was when he was just a child at 7 years old. He was caught playing with his brother's favorite toy, and his brother, in response, grabbed Sandor by his hair, dragged him over to the fire pit, and held his face in the flames. It took 3 grown men to pull him off, and Sandor, well, he's been carrying those scars ever since. And it was this incident that gave him a fear of fire. When his father died and his brother took over the family estate, Sandor left to serve under the Lannisters, and he didn't lack for work. At just 12 years old, he killed his first man, likely during Robert's Rebellion, and more specifically, my money is during the sack of King's Landing. Either way, that would not be the last man he killed, as years later, he would be chosen by Cersei Lannister to protect Joffrey Baratheon. Naturally, being chosen to protect the future king of Westeros shows how highly people thought of his combat abilities. Once we meet Sandor in the show and books, we get to see the man at work. There was a brief encounter with his brother Gregor, who was in the middle of trying to kill Loras Tyrell. Sandor was the only one to act, drawing his blade to save the Knight of Flowers. While the fight was brief and no clear winner could be picked out, standing toe-to-toe against his brother is still quite impressive. Next time we see his combat capabilities is when he takes part in the slaughter of Eddard Stark's household guard. After the bloody incident, he was made a member of the Kingsguard, and is in fact the first and only person to have ever been appointed as a member of the Kingsguard without having a knighthood. The days go by, and soon it is Joffrey's birthday, and a tourney is thrown. Though while he participates in the show, winning his duel, in the books he instead stays by the side of Joffrey, commenting on how pathetic those participating were, deciding it wasn't even worth the time. Later on in the series, there was a riot in King's Landing, and during the moment, Sandor did his duty, protecting Joffrey from the angry smallfolk and later saving Sansa, hacking down his fair share of individuals. However, all these incidents that we've gone over are not incredibly impressive. However, that changes when we get to the Battle of the Black Water. With a Lannister host, he carves a bloody path through the opposition, yet the wildfire that seemed to set the ocean ablaze causes him to desert when Tyrion orders him to return to the battle. After desertion, Sandor is captured by the Brotherhood without banners and is put on trial for his crimes. Though this quickly leads to a trial by combat where Sandor faces Beric Dondarrion and his flaming sword. Despite his fear of fire, he is able to best Beric in the duel and kill him, for the moment at least. After the duel, the Brotherhood released him, but they took away all his earnings, leaving him penniless. He planned on sneaking in to fight and get his earnings back, but it was at this moment Arya tried to escape the Brotherhood. In the spur of the moment, he abducted her with plans on ransoming her to her brother Robb. This, however, does not go as planned, as once they reached the Twins where Robb was located, disaster struck, as this was the night the Red Wedding would be enacted. Chaos erupted, and in it all, Sandor slew a handful of Frey Knights. He and Arya escaped from the carnage and began to travel to the Vale in hopes that Arya's aunt would ransom her. But, like the previous plans, this did not go accordingly. The two stopped by an inn that happened to be run with 3 of Gregor's men, Polliver, the Tickler, and a pimply squire. Arya handled the squire while Sandor dealt with the 2 men, but he had been slow due to drinking before the fight, and because of this suffered very serious wounds. They grew infected, and soon Sandor fell off his horse and begged Arya to mercy kill him. She didn't. Instead, she left him there to, allegedly, die. Now, with his fighting feats laid out, let's talk about his arms and armor, starting with his armor, of course. We don't have a lot of specifics on what he wears in the books, the best description seeming to be it was soot dark armor. So we will have to look to the show, and like many of the armors in the show, it's rather functional. Pretty much everything from the neck down looks top-notch. His shoulders are protected with gorgets and brigadines with mail underneath. His arms are decked out with spalders, lames, and rear braces. When we get past the waist, it's a little less impressive, his legs being rather exposed. However, I'm going to make a controversial judgment and rule that it's the fault of the show rather than the character. So for this fight, Sandor will have some better leg armor. If you think I'm being biased, well...
Fuck off.
The final bit that is important to go over is his helmet. And well, you see, it's shit. I know it looks cool, a snarling dog, but the complicated design and size makes his head a bigger target. I was going to give him a pass since it might have just been used for ceremonial reasons, but nope. In both the books and the show, he wears it when he fights. When it comes to his weapons, well, Sandor is quite versatile. He has used warhammers, axes, sword, maces, and daggers. However, it is clear that he favors using a sword, as the times he used other weapons were one-offs, or in the case of the warhammer, just used to break down a door. His second weapon is a bit harder to pick, but I'll give him a shield to accompany his use of the sword. Now, let's move on to the captain of the Iron Fleet, the master of the Iron Victory, Victarion Greyjoy. Victarion Greyjoy, the youngest son of Quelyn Greyjoy and most likely physically the strongest. He leads the Iron Fleet during the Greyjoy Rebellion, taking part in burning down the Lannister fleet. He later met Stannis in battle, however despite having the faster vessels, he was outmaneuvered by Stannis, who used the larger war galleys to smash his fleet. Though he survived, and luckily for Victarion, we are not judging him based on his tactical capabilities. He also has a habit of beating people to death, the first being his third wife. However, more impressively, he killed 4 other men in his life with just his hands. And in the past, he has been known to best Harris Harlaw plenty of times, who, in his own right, is a skilled fighter, armed with a Valyrian steel blade, at one point fighting and defeating 7 men, killing 3 of them. Skipping ahead a bit past the King's Moot, he is ordered by his brother and now king, Euron, to take the Shield Islands. While he quite easily handles fighting the lightly armored sailors, he does engage in a duel with Talbert Seri, a young knight who, like him, wore heavy armor with no fear of drowning. The fight seems evenly matched until Victarion catches his opponent's blade in his mailed hand and tosses it into the sea. And now, with his opponent unarmed, he quickly overpowers him and bashes him into the sea, where he's drowned due to his armor. His next mission was to sail all the way to Meereen in order to convince Daenerys Targaryen to wed his brother, though he intends to wed her himself. And on the journey he comes across many merchant ships, cutting down the inhabitants, but the future seems to hold plenty of battles for the Iron Kraken. I already mentioned it, but it bears repeating that Victarion is a very heavily armored warrior, with chainmail and boiled leather underneath heavy plate which pairs well with his lobster steel gauntlets. The man is a walking steel golem. However, like Sandor, we need to talk about his helmet. Now, in my research, I've seen some ridiculous designs for his helmet. Like, designs that make Sandor's look reasonable. However, after reading the description and looking into some official art, I can tell that the design of the helmet is far more functional and reasonable. His choice of weapon is also very obvious, as he favors using his axe and shield clearly in the books. Now, with everything laid out, it's time to declare a winner, and the winner is Victarion Greyjoy. In my eyes, he is the winner. Though to be fair, it is incredibly close. Dare I say, even closer than Jaime and Oberyn's video. Both combatants are heavily armored and powerful warriors capable of cutting down plenty of men with minimal effort, meaning it's in the fine details on who would come out victorious. Victarion has two advantages over the Hound, the first being their choice in helmets. Victarion's, while decorated, is far more reasonably styled. Blows are likely to glance off, and it doesn't make his head an easier target, unlike Sandor's. Next advantage is his choice of weapon, that being an axe. While Sandor's sword could possibly find the kinks in Victarion's armor, Victarion has no such issues. His axe being top-heavy will be far more effective in dishing out damage, using the blunt end like a mace. Not to mention, the axe has some versatility that Sandor's sword just plain doesn't. For example, being able to hook parts of the body to make Sandor trip, fall, or fumble. Not to mention, his axe will also find it far easier to hack the Hound's shield to pieces, so if the fight goes on, Sandor's defenses will weaken far more considerably than Victarion's. So, that is the outcome of this matchup, but what do you guys think? Did I miss anything, either in the books or in the effects of the character's arms and armor? I would love to hear it, and if anyone makes a very good and respectable argument, emphasis on respectable, opinion. If you like this video, then click the link on screen to see what my conclusion was for Jaime and Oberyn, and check out my other casual videos if you really liked both of them. Have a good day, and be safe, everyone.